So pull up and grab a cup of tea because I have a lot of videos to make about the great fairy wars of the Palladian Empire. I had another dream last night, and I would say this is probably my 20th, maybe 30th dream about these fairy wars and what has happened in the Pleiades. And last night I met a creature. He called himself the Constable, and he was adorable. he he um he definitely was. He was short, kind of like a gnome, and he was completely glowing white. He had on a full suit and a top hat and a big bushy like mustache and beard. He kind of looked like, if you imagine, a Yorkshire Terrier combined with an elf. And so I met the constable at the Pleiadian outstation, which I will explain in my videos. And I thought, you know what? I've been sitting with this information for so long. I tell my friends, but they all think I'm crazy. But maybe somebody out there, maybe you who are listening, you feel as if your soul doesn't come from here. Maybe you feel like your soul comes from the Fae realms, that you come from what sometimes people call Pleiadian. It could be another dimension. It could be just another solar system where there is a difference in energies and the way organic beings interact with energies of the cosmos. So the things that we would consider fantasy, like telekinesis and being able to manipulate elemental forces, like shoot lightning bolts out of our fingertips, or summon fire, or turn people to water, or turn people to ice. All of those things exist in other dimensions and in also other planets because their organic forms, their bodies, are able to channel different essences of source consciousness. So all of the things that we know to be magic can exist in another place. And what one being experiences in one plane of existence also affects the rest of us, and especially if you are a soul that is from this place. So if you consider yourself a soul from the Pleiades or from the Fae realms, this might help you understand what has been happening to you and what is happening to our communities. And so, yeah, grab a cup of tea, let's snug in, and I will start at the very beginning. So the first dream I had was long time ago. There were lands and planets of beings that are able to manipulate elemental forces and magic. And there were certain families that were stronger, and they tend to kind of interbreed with each other to create children who are quite adept and quite powerful. Those children end up becoming the priest class, or the priest and priestesses of the ancient Fae bloodlines. And they would often be in charge of governing or of taking care of, if there was any sort of nefarious things going on, they were the ones who stepped in, kind of like guardians or superheroes of that realm. And so, with anything, power imbalances breed corruption, and corruption happened, and it did. And so what ended up happening is there developed in the Fae realm what some people call the Dark Fae, and they became disgruntled with the Light Fae, and disgruntled with the fact that the Light Fae were intermingling and interbreeding and creating these very powerful children of the light, and the Dark Fae felt as if their children did not have the same advantages. So they became power hungry to create artifacts and create weapons of very powerful conduits for elemental forces and energies. You're also going to see some similarities to Atlantis here, by the way. For those of you who have dreamed of or have experienced Atlantean technology or dimensional memories, this might as well. This might kind of allude to it, because I think that what happened to Atlantis were the Arcturians and Syrians, but it happened in the Fae realms as well with the Pleiadians, very similar energies. And really, it boils down to the haves and the have-nots, and people who have power want to consolidate and keep power, and people who don't have power are resentful and feel as if they have no ability to protect their families or provide for their young. And it created this incredible resentment and pain. It created pain in the collective consciousness of the Fae. Because just like we as human beings have a collective consciousness, so that every time we dream, we sink down into that collective consciousness to link in, because our higher self is linked into the collective consciousness of the earth field. So do the Pleiadians. They have their own collective. They have the fairy collective, or what we would call the Pleiadian collective. And every star system has its own collective consciousness. It has to do with the resonant energy of the beings. Just like all plants connect with each other, all animals, they connect with each other. All of us are connected. And sometimes those unconscious and subconscious realms can overlap, so we can kind of walk through kind of like a membrane and interact with other beings that we can interact with animal spirits and different spirits across the cosmos in our dreams. But that has to do with us learning how to come to grips with who we are as a being, and also understanding that we are fully sovereign. And that's where I'm going with these stories, because it's a really beautiful story. So the darkness started when there was a power imbalance, where the light elves and the light fae, they had more magical capability than the dark elves and the dark fae. And what that did was it inspired the dark elves and the dark fae to create material objects, weapons, to level the playing field between the light elves and the light fae. But they were still resentful, because making these magical objects required very skilled artificers, and they often sought other clans like the dwarves and the gnomes and the goblins in order to make these things. And sometimes also these artifices, these magical objects, would go wrong, because they might end up getting filled with the trauma of the wielder. And let's say you had every intention, you are a dark fae, and you created, let's say, a sword that could sway the minds of elves. And you unfortunately had a lot of trauma, and while you were wielding the sword, your trauma got embedded with that artifact. And then when your child picked that up, they absorbed that trauma as much as the magic and the knowledge. So then you had trauma in the dark fae being passed down through various lineages from generation to generation, through these artifacts. And then the dark fae began to be corrupted and angry and resentful, much as what we are seeing here on this earth. And so we humans, we pass down our trauma through action and also through our DNA. And so, but in the Fae realms, it's passed down through magical objects. So enjoy. This is part 1, and just a setup and a beginning of what happened with the Fae Wars, and I will continue for other videos.